Dab, no lagging my dab, no lagging my dab. All right, all right. Well, welcome back to the Select Start Fantasy Football Podcast, Election Edition. I'm your host, Ace. Joining me tonight, as usual, are my pod brothers, Kosher Killer, Big Baller Edgar, Ian, that's Ian spelled backwards. How we doing, fellas? Week 8 is in the books, yo. It's week 9. How we feeling, guys, at this point in the season? Maybe some major takeaways to open up the show.
At this point in the season, it's kind of just looking at what you had at the beginning of the season, comparing it to what you've seen now, and trying to move forward with some confidence, even though the bye weeks may have slowed some rolls down.
Just one of the things that stands out over the first 8 weeks for me is just, the injuries and the way it's affecting fantasy this year for a lot of you out there. It's tough. It's been tough. The waiver wire every week has almost been a necessity every week for probably a lot of fantasy owners out there. I know for me, I've had, to dig into the waivers, quite often. So, I anticipate the same for the back half of the season. It won't be any different. So just make sure, you're hitting that waiver, because you never know when somebody's going to go down. We just had some very key important injuries I'm sure we're going to get into.
I think Nye hit it. The injuries this year have been off the charts. We're seeing key players going down every week, and that means that you got to make up points, and that means you got to pay attention to matchups. That means looking at the waiver wire and figuring out who your best play is going to be whenever one of your key guys goes down.
At this point, I guess let's just start with injuries. More 49er injuries. Kosher, man, take us through it.
Yeah, Tevin Coleman has a knee injury, so he's going to be out. There's no word yet on the timeline. Jimmy Garoppolo, high ankle sprain. He's out at least 6 weeks. George Kittle is out 8 or more weeks. He's got a small fracture in his foot. This means that you're looking at firing up Jerick McKinnon, JaMycal Hasty, Jordan Reed, and Ross Dwelley on Thursday night against the Packers.
Let's just pause right there and just talk about those guys real quick while we're there. The Packers can be had. I'm sure there are leagues where McKinnon's available, JaMycal Hasty's available, Jordan Reed's available. Guys, who are the best viable options out of this bunch?
Yeah, I'll keep it real simple. I'll keep it real easy. I'm not interested in any of them except for JaMycal Hasty. Jerick McKinnon hasn't produced in the second half of the season, and even his early production was always buoyed by receptions and receiving touchdowns. It kind of has fallen back down to earth. For the last 3 out of the last 4 weeks have been subpar for McKinnon, so I'm not interested in him. Jordan Reed is still not actually healthy. He was activated last week to get work in on the field, but they still are not actually calling him a certain play on Thursday. It's a short timeline. I'm not really interested in Ross Dwelley, especially with Nick Mullins throwing the ball, so that doesn't help him on that end. And I'm not interested in Nick Mullins with the top 2 pass catchers in San Francisco not being available.
Now I jump in here.
Yeah, honestly, you hit on the head with JaMycal Hasty with their running back situation. He looks to be the best option as of right now. Jerick McKinnon has kind of faded until like a third down, just a reserve type role. But honestly, Brandon Ayuk, and if you hit the waiver wire last week and you went and picked up Brandon Ayuk, you're going to be, benefited by the fact that really there's nobody else, on this offense who can make plays like he can. So I think right now your best option is a Brandon Ayuk. He should see a lot of volume. They're probably going to figure out a lot of ways to get the ball in his hands, not just, down the field. A lot of jet sweeps, these handoffs that, we've seen featured with Deebo Samuel. So if I'm a Brandon Ayuk owner, I'm not, concerned about, Jimmy Garoppolo being there or not being there. I'm going to put him in my lineup. He's going to see a lot of volume.
You're just getting ravaged by injuries this year. One sneaky play for me. I hate it for everybody else. I hate it for Garoppolo. I hate it for Kittle. I hate it for the guys that they're losing. I love it for a guy like Jordan Reed. I mean, the talent's obviously there. You would love to see what he can do. Now, seemingly, he's one of few skill possessions they have left. Kendrick Bourne's there, but I'm not sure how much attention he garners. And then Jeff Wilson. Where's Jeff Wilson when you need him, man? Jeff Wilson would be getting all this work if he were healthy. But, the Niners,
another
the
sneaky
injury,
one who might find his way into more production is Kyle Juszczyk, kind of their Swiss Army knife. I know last time Kittle went down, we've seen him featured a little bit more in the passing game. And now with their running back, room kind of depleted, you might even see him getting more involved in the running game, especially near the goal line. I feel like he might be a sneaky play. More than any other fullback in the league, he's more of he's a better athlete who can do a number of things in that offense, not just pass blocking.
Detroit, Motor City, man, we got injuries there too.
Kenny Golladay with an injured hip. He is expected to miss the Lions game against the Vikings. He might go on injured reserve. If you're looking to play someone, play Marvin Jones, the pride of UC Berkeley.
Marvin Jones, guys, we co-signed that. Is there anybody else? Are we firing up DeAndre Swift now? Do we have more confidence in DeAndre Swift once he makes it back healthy to the lineup? I'll start with you, Nye.
I find it hard with this offense to kind of gauge, productive players. I know Marvin Jones had a really good game after Kenny Golladay exited. Honestly, I think outside of Marvin Jones, you're probably fading a bunch of these guys. Marvin Jones and T.J. Hawkinson. T.J. Hawkinson's been good this year. DeAndre Swift, he kind of had a game that was kind of back down to earth. So it's one of those things where, if you have the luxury or if you have the opportunity to pick up a guy like Marvin Jones on the waiver wire, go ahead and do it. He's a guy you can plug in. He could be a third wide receiver, and with the volume he'll most likely get, he'll probably creep up into that number 2 slot. So yeah, obviously that's if you have him already or if he's on the waiver wire, you want to target him.
Big baller, jump in here.
Yeah, I co-sign with both what Kosher and I said. Really though, I can't hide that I have no excitement for anybody outside of TJ Hawkinson from a fantasy, like from an actual plug into your lineup kind of perspective. Yeah, go roster Marvin Jones. He probably will see volume. He's going to be a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, and he's rosterable in just about any league format. But that doesn't mean I'm excited about him, and I wouldn't be playing him in my roster if I had just about any other option anywhere else. I know that losing Kenny Golladay is going to be a big blow, and it does open up some opportunities, but I think TJ Hawkinson, big value right there. He's been performing. He's been seeing a good target volume. He was the number 2, I think, before this injury went down. So I think this only helps TJ Hawkinson end the season. Now with Kittle out, TJ Hawkinson could easily end up as the number 2 tight end rest of the way. So that could be tremendous. But the rest of these options, I'm just downgrading the Detroit Lions offense as a whole. I'm downgrading Matt Stafford as a result of this.
We have a sample size of what this offense looks like without Marvin or without Kenny Golladay. They played their first, 3 games without him, and, Marvin Jones was really nowhere to be found. I agree with Big Baller. It's hard to be excited about anybody right now in that offense.
Moving along, Darrell Henderson had a thigh injury. Reports are saying that it's not quite serious. He's not expected to miss time. In other situations, if he were missing time, I'd say fire up Cam Akers. I know he's back.
Didn't talk much about Calvin Ridley as well, who went out Thursday night with his midfoot sprain. He is day-to-day. Although the Falcons do have a bye coming up next week, might be one of those situations you want to keep an eye on, whether or not they decide to kind of shut him down and give him the 2-week rest.
Just worth bringing up, it is coming up around the corner for a few people. Drops for some of the guys who are getting healthy. Chris Carson looks to be back this week. They're optimistic he'll be back. Carlos Hyde is unlikely to be back, but DJ Dallas seems to have run through his use this season. Mike Davis is probably done. CMC probably coming back as well. And Gio Bernard could be done bye week this week, and Mixon potentially healthy coming off the bye week.
I'm hearing about that Mike Davis. Like the dream of Mike Davis is ending, and I play C-Mac this week. Great. All right, let's talk week 8. I'll start with Dalvin Cook. Running wild, man. He's getting volume. He's getting touchdowns, 4 of them to be exact. And the very most important thing, he stayed healthy all game. He didn't leave the game once. I might passive aggressively mention that Green Bay's run defense is kind of trash, but that's Dalvin Cook, man. Let him cook. DK Metcalf, I mean, he tried his best to top like 50-point performance of week 7 with his 40-point performance in week 8. He tacked on 2 touchdowns, man. DK is going crazy. Stephen A. Smith is calling him the second coming of Megatron, and I won't even dispute that. I really won't. Russell Wilson stays hot. He's good for about 3 touchdowns in every game. He's got David Moore looking like the second coming of Megatron. In 7 games, 4 of those have been double-digit scoring weeks. I'll throw it back to you guys. Is David Moore rosterable in this offense? Big baller.
Man, I took a look into this after David Moore was brought up and his success the last couple of weeks. I think one of the funniest things is that David Moore in our league got double-digit points week 1 because he had a fumble recovery, which I don't think happens again this season. But regardless, he has been able to provide value both as an option in the offense and a return man on a weekly basis. I think that if you need somebody on the bottom of your bench, there's definitely much worse options on the wire than David Moore. He could be rosterable and useful for you down the stretch.
Yeah, you know what? I like David Moore too, and I've actually recommended him on a few occasions. I mean, you just look at the up and down nature of his stat line. He's obviously is a guy you can play in very good matchups. This weekend happened to be a very good matchup. Moving forward, I mean, there's just a lot of volatility there with David Moore. A very good football player, but his stat line can fluctuate. I think if you're holding on to him, looking for him to like pop or something like that, you're going to spend a lot of weeks with him on your bench where he's kind of had a good week because I don't know if you'll ever get to the point where you have enough confidence to play a guy like David Moore. Right. In a deeper league, yeah, I think you could go there as maybe a third flex type guy and hope in a spot and try to get you a good week. I'm not sure the volume towards his direction is high enough to be like, I feel great going with David Moore this week. DK Metcalf is going to eat up so many of the targets. Then Tyler Lockett's going to eat pretty much what's left. And then David Moore is going to get a few deep shots a game. And that's the thing. Like, he's going to get those deep targets. You look at his stats. He has a lot of air yards. He's going to get targeted down the field. But other than that, it's a hard play. It's a hard play for me.
I will just wrap it up and say, like, I'm a Tyler Lockett owner, and I noticed the trend of if Lockett doesn't get it, DK gets it. And the days that DK goes off, Lockett is competing with David Moore. He's competing with the Freddie Swains. He's competing with those other guys to even break even. He's a little matchup dependent. I mean, that might be the only thing to give you confidence to play him. It's just if he's going against Minnesota, if he's going against, Detroit or one of these really pass defenses. I'm very high on David Moore. I would roster him if I hadn't had another Seahawk on my team. I think you could be strategic with him, but definitely someone worse. I mean, you guys mentioned it. He's got Russell Wilson throwing the ball. That itself gives you a little more hope, a little more faith in your play, in your deployment of him. Okay, DK, Russell, Pat Mahomes. You guys got my top performers. Give me you guys' top performers very quickly. I'll start with you, Big Baller.
Cool. So I'm going to go with the pair of receiving. We can call them receiving brethren because they're playing both on the LA Rams, and they've been doing this work for the last couple of years together. And that's Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. We talked about them off air just last week and kind of the pairing that they have in LA and how they work together so well. And this week was great. 11 for 110 for Cooper Kupp, and Robert Woods, 1 rush, 9 yards, 1 touchdown, and he had 7 receptions for 85 yards and then a touchdown. Both with huge fantasy weeks. Even though Jared Goff comes out here, lays a big old boo-boo, is one of the busts of the week. There's a bunch of picks, 61 pass attempts. That's probably it did help fuel their stats, but the completions are actually similar to what you've been seeing on a week-to-week basis. And I think it's kind of interesting if you look at this Rams team, which is a run-first team. Kupp and Woods have been the 2 fantasy guys you would have wanted off this team. Darrell Henderson has had several weeks topping out and around 10 fantasy points in PPR formats, which has kind of limited his value. That committee, sure, Darrell Henderson has been the best back and has looked the best in that committee, but it has limited his production, whereas Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp have continued to produce, even when Jared Goff stumbles. So a fantastic week from the 2 of them. And the Philadelphia DST guys, DSTs can win you a week if they perform the way that Philadelphia did. And we mentioned going against the Dallas Cowboys, you want to target them, and it worked this week for 20 fantasy points in certain formats. But regardless, Philadelphia's 4 sacks, 2 fumbles recovered, a safety, and a touchdown. That's major fantasy production, any kind of scoring. So the Philadelphia DST, because they probably helped you out this week. Also, Dallas is going against Pittsburgh.
Shout out
you
Brandon
probably
Graham.
can't stream it, but if you've got the Pittsburgh DST, you're probably feeling pretty good about your matchup this week.
Yeah, you will.
We're stoked. Kosher, jump in here, man. Top performer.
I'm going to hop onto the DST train, and I'll go with Miami. Their defense had 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. They had a pick. They're also getting you points no matter what they did. And I'm going to look offensively at a different wide receiver. I'm going to look at T. Higgins on the Bengals. Had 6 catches on 9 targets for 78 yards. It looks like he and Burrow are really developing some chemistry right now on the field. On the season, he's got 33 catches, 488 yards, and 3 scores so far.
They are certainly balling. And that Miami Dolphins defense, man, they had Goff looking shook. Dropper shot. We're bringing Dropper shot
Whoa,
back.
can I get mine in? Can I get mine in? Goodness.
Oh, you didn't get yours. I'm so sorry. My bad. I'm so sorry. My bad.
No, it's all right. Cut me down at the knees.
IE Pro Elite
No,
scores
I
getting
really
docked.
didn't. Dang. Shots fired. I love it. Go ahead.
I'm gonna continue with the trend of picking on the Cowboys. One of my top performers of the week is Robert Spillane, inside linebacker for the Pittsburgh Steelers. In replace of Devin Bush this weekend against the Baltimore Ravens. He collected 11 tackles, a fumble recovery, and an interception that went to the house. He is playing phenomenal. He's one of those guys I picked up on film who's playing really, really well. They went and traded for Avery Williamson from the Jets, but honestly, I think Robert Spillane might be a guy who can hold off an Avery Williamson with the kind of play he's been having. I know he got a little banged up in that Baltimore game, so we'll see, how that looks moving forward. But Robert Spillane really popped for me. He popped for me in the game against Tennessee, and he played really, really well in that game. He played really, really big in that game. He actually had a big hit on Derrick Henry. Robert Spillane, a name to know. If he's out there on the waiver wire, he might be a guy you can go look at, especially with them playing the Cowboys this weekend. And you know what? Phillip Rivers, Phillip Rivers, man, he just keeps he plays trash, and then you got to put him on your bench or you got to cut him. And then he just goes out and he plays a really solid game. He's another one of those guys who'll probably be heavily targeted because he's put together back-to-back games this weekend, or not this weekend. He's put together back-to-back games, although with a bye in between. But he went out and threw 3 touchdowns. Another guy who could, very well get the nod for top performer. Very surprising.
Yeah, super surprising. All right, Dropper shot. We've been following Lamar Jackson versus David Carr. This week, Lamar Jackson finished ahead of David Carr, which hasn't really been the trend this year, but both kind of finishing in that 19 to 25 QB range. I will leave this question up to Big Baller. We're not dropping Lamar Jackson. No one's even considering dropping him unless you're stupid. Sorry if I'm offending all stupid people, but you're not dropping Lamar Jackson. So at this point, are we shopping Lamar Jackson?
I mean, if we remember what I was talking about from early on in this season, I even did a little bit of a rant a couple weeks back about what I was thinking about with Lamar Jackson. And yeah, I'm shopping Lamar Jackson. I've been shopping Lamar Jackson, but with the idea in mind that if you took Lamar Jackson, you probably took him with some high draft capital. And he's likely one of the very few players on your roster that has the ceiling to actually give you one of those boom fantasy weeks. I'm not shopping him just to fill up my roster with people that I wouldn't need if my roster doesn't need depth. Lamar Jackson still has that rushing potential, the rushing and the production potential to be a higher tier fantasy option. So shop, but don't give him away. Shop if you can get a good deal for him. And same thing with Derek Carr. Derek Carr has performed better than expected this year, and I think people are starting to catch up on it. It was a bad week last week. I honestly expected much better production, but it didn't go that way. And no excuses made. I believe Derek Carr bounces back in these coming weeks, and I believe that he continues the production, the consistency he's shown throughout the season. So these are both guys. You need to recognize the people that you have. The Derek Carr probably doesn't have the same ceiling Lamar Jackson has. I wouldn't trade them straight up for each other. Absolutely not. But recognize the pieces that you have. Shop them if you find a good deal, but hold on to them tight otherwise, because they're still both producing for your fantasy rosters. And that's been hard to find. Look at the QB waiver wire right now, and you'll see people in Superflex and double QB leagues messing around with Brett DiNucci's. And that's not a game you want to be playing if you have Lamar Jackson or Derek Carr giving you a consistent production week to week.
Yeah, that's real.
So at what point are we settling for the pedestrian deal with Lamar Jackson? Like, how late does it get until Lamar Jackson loses that value, loses that leverage, to where maybe an owner that you're trading him to can kind of lowball you now for him, because he knows, like, hey, the majority of the season's done. He's kind of underwhelmed up until this point. Hence the reason why you're dealing him. At what point do we get desperate and we start shopping him for maybe less than ideal circumstances? Nye.
No, I don't think you do. I mean, you just highlighted, the quarterback situation out there. Obviously, in any package for a Lamar Jackson, you're hoping to get somebody back in return, or unless you have another quarterback who's actually producing for you. Honestly, I agree with Big Baller. Like, you don't give them away. I think if you can get, a substantial package for Lamar Jackson that kind of makes you better overall, I think that's a deal that could be made. But there's no way I'm giving up Lamar Jackson for pennies on the dollar. That's not happening. Like, you've invested too much into Lamar Jackson to just give him away. Because the thing is that whoever's going to, give you that crappy deal is going to get insane value. Because Lamar Jackson, he didn't draft Lamar Jackson. More than likely, he's giving you a bucket of, nobodies. Or not, I want to say nobodies, but some second-tier players for Lamar Jackson, and you're hoping to kind of like put that all together. Lamar Jackson gives that person insane value. You just made, a league mate, better without really getting better. Honestly, you have to get a premium, probably, a first, second round type player back in order to kind of pull the trigger on a Lamar Jackson, a healthy one at that. And honestly, I don't think you trade Lamar Jackson. I think he's doing fine for you, and considering the quarterback landscape, Big Baller pointed out, man, it's, I'd rather have that consistent production with the chance to go boom at any given moment.
Very interesting takes. Very interesting. I would just caution, if someone were shopping Lamar Jackson to me at the trade deadline, better believe I'm getting you for everything. I'm getting you for everything. Because for me, where was this energy 8 weeks ago? Like, sorry, now you're desperate. You're trying to trade Lamar Jackson out of desperation. Don't allow yourself to get to that point in the season. If you need to make a move, make a move. But, I'll just caution our viewers, don't be a prisoner of the moment. Don't be a prisoner of the draft and the spot that you selected him. If you're making a deal and you're trading Lamar Jackson, that you think is going to help get your team over the hump, make the deal. Big Baller, will you jumping in here?
Yeah, I will. And I'll throw us back towards being prisoners of the moment. To begin the season, Josh Allen started off as maybe the QB1, QB2. There was Josh Allen MVP talks after the first 3 weeks, and they were merited. Josh Allen was performing very well. And since then, in the last 4 weeks, Josh Allen has crashed back to earth towards the QB that we thought he would be. It's easy to get caught up in that moment, and I know I did get caught up in Josh Allen's beginning of the season. But Lamar Jackson has consistently kept going. Don't get caught up in 1 week, 2 week bad performances. Look at his line throughout the season. Yes, it's not what you wanted, but it is still better than the rest of the league. He's a top 12 QB. Single QB leagues, you better not be dropping him. Yes, maybe you find somebody else who you stream against bad matchups. Pittsburgh's an awful matchup, and it was a bad matchup for him last week. So you knew that this was going to be one of those points where you kind of just took the blow. You drafted a guy who you knew was going to have bad matchups every once in a while. Everybody has players that have bad matchups. Lamar Jackson does not merit a drop, and he does not merit a sell yet. Lamar Jackson is someone you're trying to buy on the low. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind also, like, he gets Indianapolis next week. He gets New England, and he gets Tennessee, and we've seen what Tennessee has been allowing the quarterbacks. He does have a rematch with Pittsburgh coming in Week 12, and then he ends the season with Dallas in Week 13, Cleveland, Jacksonville in 15, the Giants, and then Cincinnati. His last 5-6 games is going to be where you win this thing. Anybody who's looking at that schedule is understanding, like, hey, you know what? Lamar Jackson is going to be able to close, because I'm looking at all those matchups and I'm like, hey, he could have plus matchups in all plus scoring in all those matchups, and it's just one of those situations where I wouldn't let him. His schedule is too nice down the stretch. You've already dealt with you've already gone through the hard part with Lamar Jackson, and honestly, he's probably he's not the player on your fantasy team who's killing you every week. More than likely, somebody else is. You can find another way to make your team better and to kind of overcome whatever Lamar Jackson maybe isn't getting you. But Lamar Jackson isn't the reason why, you're struggling. I wouldn't look at him like, hey, you know what? He's going to get together at some point in time. They're going to get rolling, and he has some matchups down the stretch that look ripe for big games.
LJ owners, you guys just hang tight. Ian, you make great points about his matchups down the stretch. I mean, that's where you need a Lamar Jackson. You're going to be counting on him to perform against a lot of cupcakes. I can only imagine. I can only imagine how mad you'd be if he bombs the easiest part of his schedule. I don't have any advice for you if that happens. I thought it was a compelling kind of trend, Big Baller, you brought up. We're going to follow it for the rest of the season. Very quickly, Cam Newton, dropper shop. He's only got 3 double-digit scoring weeks in 7 games. He kind of squandered the game on Sunday. I will start with who do I start with here? Kosher. Cam Newton, man. You dropping or shopping?
I am absolutely trying to shop him, and if I can't get anyone to bite on the name recognition, I'm dropping him. Cam Newton has only surpassed 200 yards in 1 game this year. His second highest total has been 174. He's got 7 interceptions compared to only 2 touchdowns. He's not giving you yardage. He's not giving you scores. He's someone that, at best, you can try and get someone because of the name recognition, but more often than not, he's going to be on your bench. He's not winning you weeks.
His next 5 weeks, he has good matchups. He has Baltimore in there, but 4 out of his next 5 matchups, he looks to be a quarterback. He gives you he's going to give you those rushing yards, so he's going to give you somewhat of a floor, and with a touchdown, he gives you a nice floor. And like I said, 4 out of his 5 next matchups are really, really good matchups. He gets the Jets next, and they're selling off pieces left and right. It might be one of his best games. Honestly, it might be a good time to sell Cam Newton after the next game, because more than likely he's going to have a good game against the Jets.
I'm definitely I'm not buying Cam Newton, and that's what I'm advising, is not buying Cam Newton. Whether you choose to drop him, keep him, rename him and hope he plays differently, that's totally each manager's decision, but I'm not buying Cam Newton. I was already concerned about Cam Newton coming into this week. Coming out of the bye, his pass tracking showed that he didn't make any passes in his first 2 games to the right side of the field at all in either of those 2 games, which is concerning because his production has been poor through the air. Obviously, he's not the kind of running quarterback like a Kyler Murray or a Russell Wilson or any of the rushing quarterbacks whose floors have actually elevated them into the top 12 in fantasy this season. So Cam Newton, he can be a hold if your roster demands that you do. But if you don't have Cam Newton on your team, consider yourself lucky. He's not a buy in my book. He's somebody who I expect to see more problems from. It sounds like New England's hiding something from us. And would that surprise any of us?
They're hiding good players. They're hiding the skill position players. I'm not sure there's anything wrong, Cam. I just think,
Just to give the audience some context, Nye is our resident Cam Newton apologist. He will sell you Cam Newton salt.
Okay, question here. Question. If Cam Newton today was traded to the Bears, would we be talking about dropping or shopping?
I don't think we're having the same conversation, but I mean that doesn't really make any point. What point are you trying to make there?
No, I'm just saying you called me an apologist. I'm just saying we're not gonna get into the weeds on this thing. Cam Newton, a shop,
okay,
a definite shop.
Okay, Ricky Watch, Joe Burrow. He's been a mainstay in this segment. He did not disappoint on Sunday, throwing another 2 touchdowns for a big win against Tennessee. T. Higgins. Let's talk about T. Higgins here. In 6 of 8 games, has digit scoring weeks, 3 combined touchdowns on the year. Is T. Higgins kind of passing CeeDee Lamb, passing Justin Jefferson as probably the biggest rookie standout wide receiver this year? I'll start with you, Big Baller.
That has to be said without a doubt. And I don't think that has much more to do than just situation. CeeDee Lamb has been dropped from a great situation into a terrible one. And Justin Jefferson was in a terrible situation from the very beginning. And it shouldn't surprise anybody that after that one big week and 2 semi above solid weeks, we've seen some duds. And that's just more to do with where they're at. If you look at T. Higgins, it's him and a slot guy. No offense to Tyler Boyd calling him a slot guy. He's one of the best guys in the league at handling reception volume. But there's a reason Tyler Boyd isn't a guy that we all clamor for on our teams when we talk about who contenders are. Tyler Boyd is very much who he is. AJ Green is going to continue to make catches that come his way. As long as they're catchable, AJ Green's going to catch them, and then he's going to drop to the floor as he's been doing every week indescribably this season. And that's been the only reason I can think of as to why AJ Green has not scored a touchdown this season, because he doesn't seem to be playing with any physicality. He seems to be playing with just the skill that he has, which is more than enough. But T. Higgins is in my opinion the number 1 on this team because of his explosiveness, because he has the big play potential that nobody else on this roster in the receiving corps does. CeeDee Lamb doesn't have the same situation. His quarterback situation died. And now me, an Amari Cooper owner, I'm got to be worried about whether Amari Cooper is about to see a major fall off in production. Obviously, one bad week. Don't freak out just yet. But speaking about just what are the rookie wide receivers and where are they at, T. Higgins has to be the one with the best situation going into the second half of the season. If not, Jalen Reagor, also worth mentioning. If not for prior production, just for
great game,
the fact that he's coming into really good game coming off the injury. He did have extra time to actually heal from his shoulder injury, which is more concerning than his finger injury. So that's also really encouraging. Jalen Reagor could see some more production in the second half of the season, especially with Philadelphia's receiving corps still not really having sorted itself out. Fulgham still seems to be a very solid option, but Reagor seems to be stepping into the Deshaun Jackson role, which has now been vacated totally for himself.
Yeah, Jalen Reagor he didn't have a great statistical game, but if you're a Jalen Reagor owner, you feel good, about his performance. He looked healthy. He looked fluid. He looked like a priority pretty much. I think Carson Wentz is salivating just to get anybody healthy out there to throw it to. Did you guys see that stiff arm Travis Fulgham laid on homeboy? That was sheesh. My man went crazy with the stiff arm, bro.
Trayvon Diggs, he had a really good game against Philadelphia. 7 tackles and 2 interceptions. Might be a guy who's kind of selling to that role. Might even be, Dallas's best corner. Another guy I mentioned, in a previous podcast, Darryl Mooney. He got 6 targets for like 70 yards and a touchdown. I like the way they're trying to get him involved as well. Another guy you can keep your eye on. I thought he'd actually have a bigger role if Allen Robinson wasn't going to play, but Allen Robinson ended up playing. But he ended up having a nice game.
Kersher?
I mentioned him earlier, but keep your eyes open for T. Higgins. He's developing a lot of good chemistry with Joe Burrow. I think we're going to see the targets continue to be there for him, and I'm curious to see him once he finds the end zone more regularly.
We'll start calling him Sweet T. Higgins.
Ooh.
Mr. Sweet T. Higgins.
Sweet T. That's our boy. All right. Time to keep that same energy, fellas. Last week, we pitted Joe Burrow against Baker Mayfield. I don't think we really have had much of a battle there. Mayfield did not look like himself. So we're going to give Joe Burrow his roses. We're also going to give Big Baller Edgar his roses. We're just gonna give Nye and Kosher dirty looks because they're like, oh, Baker Mayfield, man, we're about to plant his
Did I choose
flag
Baker Mayfield
all
last
over the
week?
place. Like,
I thought I
you
went with
sure
Joe
did.
Burrow.
But you tried to switch. You tried to switch your pick.
I thought I went with Joe Burrow.
We caught you red-handed. We
Okay,
caught you.
you might have to bring up those
We
receipts,
caught
man.
you.
I thought I went Joe Burrow's way.
No. No, you went Baker Mayfield's way. Although
All
you
right.
had second thoughts.
All right.
This week I'm pitting Phillip Rivers up against Zach Moss. I'll start with Phillip Rivers. He had a second top 5 QB finish of the year, throwing 3 touchdowns on Sunday. Kosher, you mentioned him having that bounce back week. I think we can all agree that it was a much needed week from Phillip Rivers. Just to remind NFL fans that he was actually a decent NFL quarterback. He's got a tough matchup against Baltimore next week, and then Zach Moss had his coming out party as a rookie with his most productive week at this point. We can kind of see the shift happening between him and Devin Singletary. We kind of see Zach Moss being ushered into that lead back row. He carried the ball 14 times for 81 yards and 2 touchdowns. Who we got, fellas, to keep that same energy in week 9? Zach Moss, Phillip Rivers. Kosher, I'll start with you.
Zach Moss, undoubtedly. He's becoming the lead back. Both he and Singletary are touchdown dependent. They haven't found the end zone regularly, but Moss is getting more touches right now than Singletary. He's being productive with the touches that he's getting. Rivers is too inconsistent, and with the Ravens coming up, I think Zach Moss is going to keep the energy. I don't think Phillip Rivers keeps it this week.
I just keep looking at these matchups and trying to think to myself, like, who's going to get the scores? Because I don't like the matchup for either Zach Moss against Seattle and Rivers against Baltimore. And you know what?
It's
I'm
a
just going
tough
to go
one.
with – I'm going to go with a gut feeling. This one actually goes against my actual projections. But I'm going to go with Phillip Rivers to keep that same energy. And like I just said, guys, that one's a gut feeling. I don't love either one of their matchups. Zach Moss is doing about a 50-50 split with Devin Singletary right now. He's been the more productive back, clearly, but they're still obviously sharing touches. And Seattle's not a perfect matchup. You can get a lot through the air that can take away from the groundwork. So I'm going to go with Phillip Rivers just because there should be enough volume. If he can stay away from too many turnovers, a couple scores there could give him a solid week. I don't have that much faith in it, but I don't have too much faith in either of those two calls this week. So I'm going to go with my gut, Phillip Rivers.
Oh, he's going for the man who has more kids than touchdown passes this year. Phillip Rivers. All right.
I'm going to go with Phillip Rivers as well, begrudgingly.
Ooh.
Going. Baltimore has a lot of guys going on that COVID list. Most notably, Patrick Queen and Marlon Humphrey have both been put on that COVID-19 list. These are guys that are going to miss time. I look for Phillip Rivers to have a productive day, I'm not looking for an outstanding day, but he could have a productive day with impact players like that missing out of the lineup. So I'm going to go with Phillip Rivers to keep that same energy. With Zach Moss, I mean, him and Singletary almost split carries down the middle. He got the touchdown volume. Do I think that's repeatable? I don't. I think Seattle can be gotten through the air. I think it's a big day for Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, and all the other Buffalo pass catchers. I think it's a shootout in the air. I don't really see Zach Moss repeating what he did against New England.
I like that pick. I just realized that I never really give my pick to keep that same energy. So I'm gonna give my pick. I think it's gonna be Phillip Rivers too.
Okay.
No. I think it's gonna be Phillip Rivers too. Only because as much as I like Zach Moss and I really like this matchup, I will kind of disagree on the fact that obviously, the Seahawks can be had in the air. So obviously, there's a prime opportunity for those wide receivers to rack up those yards. But I don't know. I have a good feeling this is one of those weeks where I just have the feeling where it's one of those weeks where the QB is going to get into the end zone. I just feel like Josh Allen's going to get a couple goal line rushing touchdowns. It just seems like that matchup. Seattle isn't incredibly formidable up front. They have a hard time getting pressure. I think they have the lowest sack rate in the NFL. Although they just picked up, who did they pick up? Carlos Dunlap. They just got Carlos Dunlap, so that might change a little bit. So, yeah, I got Phillip Rivers just because I think it's going to be a big game for Josh Allen. And they're, Seahawks, they're not really that imposing up front. So, Phillip Rivers it is. He's going to keep that same energy. Is it safe to end our show? Is it safe? Is it safe? I didn't forget about nobody. All right. That's going to do it for our Week 8, Week 9 primer. Before we get out of here, fellas, I don't know if you guys noticed, we didn't have a pick 2. It's just kind of a slow waiver wire week this week. So we're going to do a pick 1. So before we get out of here, guys, give the viewers one waiver wire pick that they can add to their rosters this week. I'll start with you, Kosher.
I'll go with Keanu Neal, the safety for Atlanta, with a matchup this week against Denver. Denver is a vulnerable team. Their offensive line is struggling. That means that Neal can make plays up close to the line of scrimmage, and he might be covering either Fant or Judy. Look for him to try and make some plays.
That's a great pick. That's the second time you mentioned him as a waiver wire pickup. Nye, pick 1.
Pick 1. Well, I'm gonna double down on my Robert Spillane, inside linebacker, with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and also I'm going to go with Jalen Guyton, wide receiver for the Los Angeles Chargers. I think it ends up with 2 touchdowns next week.
Oh, wow.
This weekend.
That's a hot take. And you've mentioned Jalen Guyton here before, too, so you're definitely holding out hope for him. And you're a Charger fan, so I get it. It makes sense. Big Baller Ed, close us out.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Matt Breida. Clearly, they're not trying to pass the ball too much right now. And with the injury of running back to Myles Gaskin, they did bring in DeAndre Washington, but DeAndre Washington will likely have to wait a week. COVID protocols are a little bit fuzzy with trades, so we'll know soon enough. But if he misses this week, then it's going to be Breida and Jordan Howard. Jordan Howard probably sees more work than what's expected, but even with the low yards per carry being mostly a result of his goal line work, I just see more rushing volume for Breida, more opportunity for a big play, get 60 and a touchdown, and you got a good little waiver wire pickup for the week. So I'm going to go with pick 1, Matt Breida.
Like that pick. All right. That is going to do it for us tonight on this election day. Just want to remind all the viewers out there to stay safe. Exercise your right to vote, even though by the time you guys see this, y'all didn't voted. We got a new president or an old president or whatever. But I just want to encourage everybody to vote, to be cool. Be cool. There are going to be a lot of tensions out there on these streets, man. You guys protect your energy and keep tuning in to Select Start Fantasy Podcast, especially in Week 9, because in Week 9, we shine, guys. We shine. For myself, for Big Baller Brand, for Kosher Killer, for Night that's Ian spelled backwards. We are the Select Start Fantasy Football Podcast. Make sure you guys you guys keep commenting, you subscribe, you hit the notification bell to be notified of all our drops. And shout out Sleeper, we're out.